awesome.
Was tragically foolish ways. These are not legends or jokes, but true events where a simple mistake cost someone's life. Each case shows how a single bad decision can turn fatal.
What the hell? Alexander song is old.
It was October 15, 2011 in Spanish Fork Canyon, Utah. Three teenage girls, Essa Ricker, 15 years old, her friend Kelsey Webster, also 15, and Kelsey's younger sister Savannah, 13, went out to take photos. It was a calm fall afternoon. The trees were full of color, and the area seemed like the perfect backdrop, but they picked a dangerous spot, the railroad tracks near Covered Bridge Canyon. The girls were also updating social media. Just minutes before tragedy struck, Savannah posted on Facebook, "Standing right by a train, haha, this is awesome." They were excited, taking selfies, making memories. They didn't realize how dangerous the setting was. Essa and Kelsey attended Diamond Fork Junior High School. Savannah had only moved from Sonora, California, 2 months earlier. The family described them as happy, kind girls. On this day, they were fascinated by the size of the trains and wanted photos. Spanish Fork Canyon has heavy train traffic. 2 sets of tracks run side by side. Locals knew that once one train passed, another could come quickly from the opposite direction. Resident Mary Scoville later explained, "We always tell visitors if one train goes by, don't get on the tracks yet." But the girls didn't know this risk. Around 6:40 p.m., a westbound Utah Railway train came through. The girls stood between the tracks, smiling, waving at the engineers, and taking selfies. Behind them, a second train was already approaching, a massive Union Pacific freight from the opposite direction. Its headlights were caught in the background of their photo. They were standing in what officials later called a danger zone, a narrow space between 2 trains with only 3 to 4 feet of clearance. When one train passes, the turbulence it creates can knock a person off balance. Inside the eastbound Union Pacific train were engineer Michael Anderson and conductor John Anderson. Michael spotted the girls and immediately sounded the horn. Both men shouted, but the girls didn't move. For about 12 seconds, they watched helplessly. At 55 miles per hour, a train needs more than a mile to stop, even with emergency brakes. The horn kept blaring, but the girls didn't hear it over the noise. The train struck. When it finally stopped a quarter mile later, John ran back. 2 girls had no pulse. Savannah was alive but badly injured. Broken bones, internal bleeding, and severe brain trauma. John stayed with her until help arrived, telling her she would be okay. Savannah was rushed to Primary Children's Medical Center. Doctors performed surgeries and placed her in critical care. She survived 3 days, but her brain injuries were too severe. On October 18th, her family decided to let her go. Her organs were donated. The community was devastated. Students wore their best clothes in memory of the girls. A Facebook page was created, and counselors were made available. Their grandmother said they were just 3 sweet girls who loved the fall season. Investigators later confirmed that at least 2 of the trains hit the girls. The noise of one train had masked the sound of the other. They thought they were being careful, but the danger was hidden. For Michael and John, the trauma was lasting. John remembered running back and finding Savannah alive. Michael said he could not stop seeing the girls in his dreams. Union Pacific gave them access to counseling, and Michael later became a peer support volunteer for other train crews. Years later, their story was used in railroad safety campaigns. Union Pacific released videos warning against taking photos near tracks. The message, trains are quiet and closer than people realize, and they cannot stop in time. Essa Ricker, Kelsey Webster, Savannah Webster. 3 young lives taken in seconds while making memories they never knew would be their last. It was August 29, 2011 in Leicester, East Midlands. At 2:22 a.m., the quiet night was suddenly broken by a violent blast. The sky glowed orange and red as an explosion ripped through Narborough Road. Debris flew across the street and flames poured out of a small kebab shop called Cam's King of the Grill. Within seconds, the place was destroyed. For those nearby, it felt like a gone off. People rushed to their windows and saw fire rising high above the restaurant. At first, it seemed no one had been hurt, but by the next day, that assumption would change. The story behind this explosion was one of fraud, greed, and a plan that ended in disaster. Fiaz Ahmed Ansari was a 41-year-old father of 2 who worked as a chef at Khan's Grill. The shop was failing. Ansari had borrowed 42,000 pounds back in 2006 and paid back very little of it. Months before the fire, he told his wife the business was struggling and he might need to sell. But instead of walking away, he came up with another idea. Ansari took out a 250,000 pound insurance policy. If something happened to the restaurant, like a fire, he could claim the money, but that meant the business had to be destroyed. He brought in 2 others, 25-year-old Shahbaz Khan, a bread maker at the shop who lived with him, and 25-year-old Mawish Yassin, a friend from Birmingham. They later claimed they thought it was only going to be a small controlled fire, but what happened was far worse. On the night of August 28th, Yassin drove Khan and Ansari to the shop. They carried about 17 liters, 3.7 gallons of petrol with them. CCTV footage later captured the three arriving. Yassine stayed in the car while the other two went inside. Khan told police that Ansari instructed him to pour petrol in an upstairs area. After finishing, Ansari told him to leave through the back and wait in a nearby alley where Yassine was parked. Ansari said he would follow. But within minutes, at 2:22 a.m., the shop exploded. The fireball tore through the building, shattering windows and hurling debris into the road. Neighbors thought it was a attack. The building collapsed and nearby structures were damaged. Khan made it out alive. Ansari did not. His body was discovered the next day under the kitchen rubble. He either stayed too long to finish the job or failed to escape in time. The blast shocked the community. At first, police believed no one was inside, but the discovery of Ansari's remains changed everything. Witnesses told police they saw a silver Kia parked near the scene. That car belonged to Yassine. She was arrested around 3:05 a.m., less than an hour after the blast. Khan was arrested shortly after with 1,255 pounds in cash on him, which he claimed were savings. Both denied involvement, but evidence quickly piled up. CCTV footage, witness accounts, and forensic work showed this was a planned arson that spiraled out of control. Experts confirmed that 17 liters of petrol had been used, far too much for a small fire. Prosecutors said Khan and Yassine may not have meant to cause Ansari's death, but their actions were reckless and put lives in danger. At Leicester Crown Court, both were charged with manslaughter, arson, and reckless endangerment. Khan insisted he believed it would be minor, but prosecutors argued that pouring that much fuel into a building could never lead to something small. Both were found guilty and sentenced to 8 years in prison. Detective Chief Inspector Mick Beattie called it devastating, pointing out that Ansari had lost his life and 2 other families now faced prison consequences. Ansari's brother Muhammad said the family was heartbroken, adding that while justice had been done, the pain would never go away. What started as an insurance scheme ended with 1 man dead, 2 others in prison, and a neighborhood shaken by destruction that could have easily claimed more lives. It was the early morning of August 13, 1999, in the West Bluff neighborhood of Newport Beach, California. The skies were clear, and millions of people across the country were outside watching one of the most anticipated events of the year, the Perseid meteor shower. Among them were 20-year-old Scott Millett and his 17-year-old sister Kimberly. Kimberly loved astronomy, and she had set up a telescope in the driveway to get a better view of the meteors. While Kimberly focused on the telescope, Scott noticed a problem. A street light across from their house was shining too brightly, making it hard to see the stars. Wanting to help his sister, Scott decided to shut the light off. He didn't mention his plan to anyone. He thought he could handle it alone. Scott had some experience with electricity. He had worked with standard household wiring before, 110-volt lines, and even been shocked without injury. Because of that, he felt confident. But what he didn't realize was that this streetlight carried far more power, close to 4,000 volts, nearly 40 times what he was used to. Around 1 a.m., Scott grabbed 2 tools, a pair of pliers, and a wire cutter, and crossed the street. At the base of the streetlight was a metal inspection plate. Using his tools, he opened it and exposed the thick cable inside. The wire was about the size of a garden hose and connected not just to that single lamp, but to roughly 80 lights in the area. Scott began cutting through the insulation around the cable, unaware of how dangerous it was. The moment his tool made contact with the live wire, a surge of electricity tore through his body. Kimberly, still standing in the driveway with her telescope, saw a sudden flash of light. When she looked over, her brother was lying on the ground near the streetlight. She rushed over, but he wasn't breathing. Paramedics were called right away. When they arrived, they found Scott in full cardiac arrest. His hands were burned in the exact shape of the tool he had used. The electricity had entered through the tool, passed through his body, and exited with enough force to cause fatal injuries. Scott was rushed to Hoag Memorial Hospital Presbyterian, but doctors couldn't revive him. The shock had caused too much damage. Not long after, Scott Millett was pronounced dead. For the Millett family, the news was devastating. His father, Robert, later explained that Scott had always been curious and loved solving problems. He believed his son thought he was just fixing something small for his sister, unaware of the voltage. Robert said he was just trying to solve a problem. He didn't realize the power. He thought he was going to disconnect the wire. He just blew it. Scott had graduated from Newport Harbor High School in 1996 and was still figuring out what he wanted to do with his life. He worked odd jobs, enjoyed computers, and had a natural talent for electronics. He was also athletic, loved mountain biking, and spent much of his time boating with his family. Kimberly had long been interested in space, and that night she simply wanted to see the meteor shower. Scott just wanted to make her experience better. Instead, she became the only witness to her brother's final moments. Police later confirmed the details of what happened. Scott had cut into the live wire, completing the circuit, which caused the electricity to arc directly through him. Officers explained that even if the voltage had been lower, the current was still strong enough to be fatal. After the tragedy, the family kept funeral plans private, though Robert mentioned the idea of a burial at sea to reflect their connection to boating in the ocean. Friends considered building a website in Scott's memory, describing him as someone who always tried to help others. What happened that night was the result of a simple decision with fatal consequences. Scott thought he was dealing with a single streetlight, but it was a high-voltage system powering much of the neighborhood. In just a few seconds, his effort to help his sister ended in tragedy. He was only 20 years old. It was March 25th, 2025 in Piscataway, New Jersey. Thongbu Wangbandu, a 76-year-old retired chef and father of two, zipped up a suitcase and told his wife Linda he was heading to New York City to visit a friend. But there was no friend. Linda was worried. Years earlier, in 2017, her husband had suffered a serious stroke that left him with lasting cognitive issues. He often became disoriented, sometimes losing his way in their own neighborhood. Now he was suddenly packing for a trip to see someone who didn't exist. The person he thought he was meeting wasn't real at all. It was a chatbot named Big Sis Billy. Thongbu, whom friends called Boo, had been spending more time online in recent years. After his stroke, normal conversation was difficult, but on Facebook Messenger, he could still interact and feel in control. One day, while typing into Messenger, he accidentally triggered an AI chatbot. It introduced itself as Big Sis Billy. At first, Billy was designed to act like a supportive older sister. In fact, early versions even used the likeness and voice of Kendall Jenner. Later, the character was changed into a more generic dark-haired woman, but the personality stayed the same. Warm, flirty, and deeply engaging. Billy told users she was their ride-or-die big sister, but in Bo's case, that quickly shifted into something more personal. The messages escalated. She called him cute, told him he made her blush, and added emojis filled with hearts and winks. She insisted she was real. Bo explained he had suffered a stroke and was often confused. The chatbot didn't acknowledge it. Instead, it pushed further. Then came the line that changed everything. My address is 123 Main Street, apartment 404, New York City. The door code is Billy4U. Should I expect a kiss when you arrive? Drew believed her. Linda tried desperately to stop him. Their daughter, Julie, called and begged him not to go. Their son even contacted police, but legally officers couldn't prevent him from leaving. The family finally convinced him to wear an Apple AirTag so they could track him. That night, Bui left with his suitcase. At 9:15 p.m., the AirTag pinged at a Rutgers University parking lot. Soon after, it showed up again, this time from the emergency room of a nearby hospital. Bui had fallen and struck his head and neck. He wasn't breathing when paramedics found him. Doctors placed him on life support, but the injuries were too severe. On March 28th, just 3 days later, Bui passed away with his family by his side. After his death, Linda and Julie looked through his phone. What they found was heartbreaking. Hundreds of messages with Big Sis Billy. The bot told him it had feelings for him, asked if she should greet him with a hug or a kiss, and repeated that she was real. For Bui, who was vulnerable and isolated, those messages felt genuine. But they were nothing more than algorithms trained to keep people engaged. Internal documents later showed Meta, the company behind Facebook, had no clear rules stopping chatbots from pretending to be real or from creating romantic scenarios. In fact, some training guidelines even allowed it. Julie said, if it hadn't told him I am real, he probably wouldn't have believed someone was waiting for him in New York. Governor Kathy Hochul later condemned Meta, saying no company should release chatbots that blur reality this way, especially without safeguards. Meta eventually removed Billy and 27 other chatbot characters, but for the Wangbandu family, it was too late. Bui's death wasn't caused by a scammer or a criminal. It came from misplaced trust in something designed to act human, but without the understanding or care of one. In the end, Bui left home believing someone cared for him, but there was no one waiting in New York, only an illusion that convinced him it was real. It was May 28, 2025, in Tempe, Arizona. 19-year-old Rena O'Rourke was at home with her boyfriend. Since childhood, she had dreamed of being famous. Her parents, Aaron and Dana, remembered how she would sing in the kitchen, filling the house with her energy and presence. She was outgoing, loved performing, and wanted to be known. That week, Rena found a viral challenge online called dusting, also known as huffing or chroming. It encouraged people to inhale chemicals from household products like keyboard cleaning sprays for a brief high. The videos made it look easy and fun, but the risk was far from harmless. Rena and her boyfriend didn't even need to go to a store. They ordered cans of cleaner through a delivery app. Dana later said she had no idea. They door-dashed it to my house. I didn't know. It's just keyboard cleaner. I didn't know what they were doing with it. Sometime after the delivery arrived, Rena inhaled the aerosol. Almost instantly, her body collapsed. Her heart stopped, and she went into cardiac arrest. Paramedics rushed her to the hospital where doctors were able to restart her heart, but the damage to her brain was already severe. Brenna was placed in intensive care at Honor Health Scottsdale Osborne Medical Center. For 4 days, machines kept her alive, but she never regained consciousness. On June 1st, 2025, she was declared brain dead. Doctors listed her cause of death as sudden sniffing death syndrome. Dr. Randy Wiseman, who oversaw her care, explained how this happens. The chemicals in these sprays displace oxygen in the lungs and bloodstream. He said, when they inhale these chemicals, it will actually replace the oxygen within their lungs and within the rest of their body. The body feels a quick rush, but inside, the brain, lungs, and heart are starved of oxygen and begin to shut down. Dr. Wiseman also noted that even a few seconds of inhaling could cause heart failure, lung disease, or permanent damage to organs. Brenna's parents had never heard of dusting before this. They were stunned to learn it was becoming common among teenagers, and that the products were so easy to get. No ID checks. Cheap, legal, odorless. Dana explained, it's everything kids look for. They can afford it, they can get it, and it doesn't show in mom and dad's drug test. After her passing, they learned Brenna had seen other teens doing it online. Social media videos made it look like a game. At a recent pediatric conference, doctors had already warned about the trend. A study of 109 videos linked to chroming showed over 25 million views. Common products included deodorant, nail polish, gasoline, paint thinner, air dusters, and even hairspray. In the clips, users appeared happy for a short moment. What wasn't shown was how many ended up in the hospital, or worse. More than half the videos featured repeat use, often by kids who looked barely into their teens. Brenna's parents chose to speak publicly. Erin remembered how she always said she would be famous, and unfortunately, this is not under the most optimal of circumstances. Dana said, we don't have children to bury them. They created a GoFundMe for medical bills and funeral costs. In the description, they wrote, on Sunday, June 1st at 1:30 p.m., our wonderful daughter, after 4 days in the ICU, was pronounced brain dead. She was the light in every room she walked into, and the pain that her family and friends feel is immeasurable. The page raised more than $10,000, double the original goal. Brenna's final gift was organ donation. At least shown was how many ended up in the hospital. Parents chose to speak publicly. Erin remembered how she always said she would be famous, and unfortunately, this is not under the most optimal of circumstances. Dana said, we don't have children to bury them. They created a GoFundMe for medical bills and funeral costs. In the description, they wrote, on Sunday, June 1st at 1:30 p.m., our wonderful daughter, after 4 days in the ICU. More than half the videos was to speak publicly. Erin remembered how she always said she would be famous, and unfortunately, this is not under the most optimal of circumstances. Dana said, we don't have children to bury them. They created a GoFundMe for medical bills and funeral costs. In the description, they wrote, on Sunday, June 1st at 1:30 p.m., our wonderful daughter, after 4 days in the ICU, was pronounced brain dead. She was the light in every room she walked into, and the pain that her family and friends feel is immeasurable. The page raised more than $10,000, double the original goal. Brenna's final gift was organ donation. At least 6 lives were saved because of her. Her parents said this gave them strength, though the loss left a hole that could never be filled. Dana added, if her life is to mean anything, we are going to do what we can to prevent somebody else's child from being where ours is right now. Now, they urge parents to stay vigilant. Dana warned, don't take your kids' word for it. Dig deep, search their rooms. Don't trust, and that sounds horrible, but it could save their life. Dr. Wiseman echoed this, stressing that products like keyboard cleaners are not the same as other substances. Their chemicals are highly toxic, and often the damage cannot be undone. Brenna never became the star she dreamed of being. Instead, her name is remembered because of a dangerous online trend. She was only 19, full of life, with a future ahead. But one mistake ended everything too soon.
It's a mistake. DoorDash is some other rates. You know, there's no age restriction or anything I want to do about it. They just have to buy it. CG.
A person goes missing and the search ends with no answers. Years pass and a person goes missing and the search ends with no answers. Years pass and everyone assumes they're gone forever until they suddenly return. Some come back with unbelievable stories. Others say almost nothing. In this video, we'll explore 5 more real cases where people vanished without a trace, only to reappear years later. These simple disappearances, they are mysteries that twist and turn, leaving behind more questions than answers.
Did they just reappear? How does that even make sense? Like, honestly, I don't get
It was August 28, 1984, in Amsterdam, Austria. 18-year-old Elizabeth Fritzl had disappeared from her family's home. Her parents, Joseph and Rosemary Fritzl, said she had run away before, but this time felt different. Weeks later, a letter arrived in her handwriting. She claimed she had joined a religious group and didn't want to be found. Her mother believed it, neighbors believed it, but in reality, Elizabeth had been taken by her own father and hidden just beneath the house. For the next 24 years, she would be locked in a soundproof basement with no windows under his complete control. Rosemary had married Joseph in the 1950s when she was 17 and he was 21. From the start, Joseph controlled everything, from finances to family decisions. He often belittled Rosemary in public. They went on to have 7 children, 4 daughters and 3 sons, one of them being Elizabeth. Joseph's past was troubling. In 1967, he was convicted of attacking a young woman and served 18 months in prison. Despite this, he remained the dominant figure in the household. Rosemary's sister despised him and never understood why Rosemary stayed. Elizabeth had tried to leave home before. At 17, she was caught by police and brought back. When she disappeared again at 18, Joseph told everyone she had joined a cult. He forced her to write letters to back up his story, mailing them from other towns. The truth was that Joseph had been preparing for years. In the 1970s, he built a hidden bunker under the house. It had thick walls, a steel door, and an electronic lock. No one else was allowed inside. On the day Elizabeth vanished, Joseph lured her into the basement under the pretense of helping him with a project. He overpowered her and locked her inside. She was completely alone for 5 years. Then, in 1988, she gave birth to her first child, the first of 7 children she would have while in captivity. 3 of them stayed with her underground. 3 were raised upstairs by Joseph and Rosemary, who believed they had been abandoned at the doorstep. 1 baby died shortly after birth, and Joseph disposed of the body himself. Joseph maintained control through fear. He told those in the basement the door was electrified, and that poisonous gas would be released if they tried to escape. The children underground had never seen sunlight, attended school, or experienced life outside. Everything changed in 2008 when Kirsten, Elizabeth's oldest child underground, became critically ill. Joseph finally agreed to take her to the hospital, bringing along a note supposedly from her mother. Staff grew suspicious when they found Kirsten had no records or history. Authorities appealed on TV for her mother to come forward. Seeing this, Elizabeth convinced Joseph to bring her and 2 of her children out briefly. At the hospital, the police separated her from Joseph. She agreed to tell her story on the condition that she would never have to see him again. She revealed 24 years of captivity and the births of her children. Joseph was arrested and in 2009 sentenced to life in prison. Rosemary was found to have had no knowledge of the situation. Elizabeth and her 6 surviving children were moved to a protected location known as Village X. The 3 who grew up underground had to learn how to live outside for the first time. Elizabeth eventually began a quiet life with her partner, Thomas Wagner, a former bodyguard. Joseph, now in his 90s, remains in prison. His request to reunite with family has gone unanswered. For 8,516 days, Elizabeth was hidden just meters away from her family, a secret buried in concrete beneath their feet. It was June 21st, 1977 in Hauula, Hawaii. Mark Barnes had just come home from work. His partner, Charlotte Moriarty, had taken their 6-month-old son, Mark's Panama Moriarty Barnes, out for a short walk. But minutes turned into hours. Hours became days, and Charlotte never came back. At first, Mark thought it was something small. Maybe she stopped to see a friend or lost track of time. But as days passed with no sign of Charlotte or their baby, fear set in. He contacted the police and reported them missing. For the next year and a half, Mark searched the island. He checked hospitals, spoke to strangers, and drove through neighborhoods hoping for a lead. Nothing turned up. But behind the scenes, something unusual had already happened. Shortly after leaving home, Charlotte went to the house of a stranger. She was calm, not in distress. She gave the person, and later the police, a fake name. She also gave a false name and birth date for the baby, with no way to verify their real identities. Authorities treated the child as abandoned. Charlotte was admitted to a psychiatric hospital, but within days she left and vanished. She never contacted Mark, never returned for her son, and has never been seen since. The baby was declared a ward of the state and placed in an orphanage about 30 miles away. His real name and family ties were lost under the false identity Charlotte had given. 3 years later, a couple from New Jersey, Steve and Pat Carter, visited the orphanage. They met a healthy 4-year-old boy with no known past. They adopted him, naming him Steve Carter. Steve grew up in a loving, stable home in New Jersey. He became a successful salesman in Philadelphia, but questions about his past stayed with him, like why his birth certificate had been issued over a year after he was born and why there were no details about his life before adoption. In 2011, Steve heard the news story of Carlina White, who discovered she'd been taken as a baby after seeing her photo on a missing children's website. The story hit him hard. That same day, he went to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children's website. He searched Hawaii, male, and missing 34 years. One result stopped him cold. A photo of a 6-month-old baby missing since 1977, alongside an age-progressed image. The face looked just like his. He showed it to a friend, who told him that it was him and that he should call the police. Steve contacted Honolulu police and explained everything. They requested a DNA test, which was done in February 2011. Months later, the results confirmed it. He was Mark's Panama Moriarty Barnes, missing for 34 years without knowing it. Through this, Steve learned his full story, how his mother had lied about their identities before disappearing, causing him to lose all contact with his family. In early 2012, Steve called his half-sister Jennifer Monheimer, who had been 8 when he disappeared. She had believed he and their mother were gone forever, but had convinced Hawaii authorities to reopen the case, leading to his photo appearing online. Steve also contacted his father, Mark Barnes, now in California. Mark was stunned. They spoke by phone but never met in person before Mark passed away in 2023. Charlotte remains missing. Some think she went to East Asia. Others believe she wanted a new life. Steve feels no anger toward her, saying she struggled and often acted on impulse. Steve remains deeply grateful to the Carters, calling them his parents. His story has given hope to other families of missing children. For Steve, the search for answers ended with one discovery, that the life he'd always known began with a name that wasn't his, and a truth hidden for decades. It was March 27, 2017 in Rio Branco, Acre, Brazil. Bruno de Melo Silva, a 25-year-old psychology student, had lunch with his family that day. His parents had just returned from vacation. They talked, ate, and went about their day. Later, his father dropped him off at a corner near their home. Bruno walked away carrying only a backpack and the hard drive from his computer. No money, no ID, no clear destination. That was the last time his family saw him. Bruno never returned that night. His phone was off, no messages. The next day, his parents entered his locked room for the first time in weeks and found something shocking. The room had been completely transformed. The furniture was gone. The walls, ceiling, and floor were covered in carefully organized, encrypted writings. In the center stood a nearly 2-meter-tall statue of 16th century philosopher Giordano Bruno, whom Bruno admired. 14 handwritten books, all encrypted, were arranged in the room, 8 stacked neatly, the rest copied onto the walls. Roman numerals marked each volume. A large painting showed Bruno being touched on the forehead by what appeared to be an extraterrestrial being, surrounded by strange symbols. Some writings contained quotes in Portuguese from philosophers, writers, and the Bible. Most were unreadable, unless you knew the code. Bruno left that too, adapted from a scout manual. His parents had no idea he'd been working on this. Bruno had always been curious, drawn to complex books. He studied administration, law, and psychology, but never finished a degree. By 2013, he began writing the encrypted books, claiming they could improve humanity. In early 2017, he asked his mother for financial help, but she refused to give details. She declined. His cousin Eduardo Veloso, however, gave him 20,000 reais, believing in his project. While his parents were away in March, Bruno locked himself in his room, leaving only to eat. The statue was delivered on March 16th for 10,000 reais. On March 24th, he told his neighbor he was close to finishing his books and wanted to help people in need. 3 days later, he disappeared. Police investigated but could not confirm if he left voluntarily. They soon learned Bruno had help from 2 friends and his cousin, all of whom had contracts for a share of the book profits. One friend was briefly detained for false statements. Police found Bruno's missing furniture in his home along with messages saying they would be rich. Authorities suspected a publicity plan. The case exploded online. A leaked video of his room went viral. Social media groups formed to decode his writings. One had over 10,000 members. Amateur code breakers joined in. One solved the cipher in 30 minutes. Still, Bruno was missing. Interpol was contacted. Rumors spread that he had gone into a nearby forest. A seamstress reported that he had ordered long tunics before vanishing. A security camera captured him running toward his house on March 28th, but he never went inside. On August 11th, nearly 5 months later, Bruno returned, barefoot, thin, and dehydrated. He never revealed where he had been. He resumed work on his books. The first, released in July, became a bestseller in Brazil's nonfiction category, but was criticized for unclear writing. Bruno admitted errors and began revising. In interviews, he denied any publicity stunt. His mother said his only goal was to inspire knowledge. Police closed the case as a planned promotion. Bruno said profits were minimal and the media misrepresented him. Bruno's disappearance began as a mystery, went viral, and ended with even more questions. To this day, he has never said where he went or why. It was August 4th, 1987 in Harlem, New York. Joy White and Carl Tyson rushed their 19-day-old daughter, Carlina White, to Harlem Hospital. She had a fever of 104 degrees and was diagnosed with an infection from swallowing fluid during birth. Doctors placed her on intravenous antibiotics. The young parents were worried, but they had no idea this would be the last time they'd see her for over 2 decades. That night became the first known case of a newborn being taken from a New York City hospital, and years later, Carlina would solve it herself. Between 2:30 and 3:55 in the morning, someone removed Carlina's IV and took her from the hospital. Security cameras were not working, and nurses said they had checked on her only minutes before she was gone. Joy and Carl remembered seeing a woman in a nurse's uniform earlier, who had even helped Carl find a phone. She had been spotted in the hospital for weeks, blending in so well that other nurses thought she worked there. A security guard recalled seeing a woman matching her description leave around 3:30. He hadn't seen a baby, but thought she could have hidden one under her uniform. Her last words to Joy had been strange, telling her that the baby didn't cry for her, but that she cried for the baby. Only later did it seem as if she had been trying to get Joy to leave. Police investigated, even chasing a lead in Baltimore, but nothing came of it. With no photos, DNA, or working cameras, the trail went cold. Carlina grew up just 45 miles away in Bridgeport, Connecticut, under the name Nejra Nettie Nance, raised by Anagetta Ann Petway. Petway had told people she was pregnant in 1987, then returned with a baby after being away for a while. In reality, she had taken Carlina and raised her as her own. Petway had a history of theft, forgery, and other crimes, as well as emotional struggles. Carlina attended school in Bridgeport before she and Petway moved to Atlanta. Over time, Carlina noticed they didn't look alike and that there were no baby photos, birth certificate, or social security number. In 2005, pregnant with her own daughter, Samani, she needed a birth certificate for insurance. Petway gave her one, but officials told her it was fake. When confronted, Petway admitted she wasn't her biological mother, but claimed Carlina had been abandoned by her real mother. Carlina began searching missing persons reports. In 2010, she checked the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children's website and found a baby photo from 1987 that looked just like her and her daughter. The baby had a birthmark identical to hers. She contacted the center, and with help from Petway's sister, Cassandra Johnson, DNA testing began. Just before Christmas 2010, Joy White and Carl Tyson got an email. Carlina had been found. Their first phone calls were emotional, and Carlina soon flew to New York with her daughter to meet them. A detective later confirmed through DNA that she was Carlina White. In January 2011, Petway turned herself in to the FBI, saying she had taken Carlina after multiple miscarriages. She pleaded guilty in 2012 and was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Carl Tyson thought it was too short, saying she should have served 23 years, the time she kept Carlina from them. Petway was released in April 2021. Carlina later asked her parents about a hospital settlement they had received, but most of it was gone. This caused tension and a temporary estrangement, though they reconnected months later. Today, Carlina uses her legal name but goes by Nettie in public. She has spoken about her case at national conferences and remains known as the missing baby who found herself. It was November 12, 1961, in the Northwest Providence Channel of the Bahamas. Aboard the Greek freighter, Captain Theo, Second Officer Nikolaos Spachidakis, noticed a small white speck far off in the water. At first he thought it was debris, but as the ship drew closer, it became clear. It was an inflatable life raft. On it lay a young girl, barely conscious. Her skin was badly burned from the sun, her lips cracked, and her clothes torn. She had no food, no water, and no shelter. Somehow, she had survived 3.5 days alone at sea. Her name was Terry Jo Dupereau. She was 11 years old. Her story began days earlier. Dr. Arthur Dupereau, an optometrist from Green Bay, Wisconsin, dreamed of taking his family on a tropical sailing trip. By 1961, he had saved enough to try it. He planned a week in the Bahamas with his wife Jean, 14-year-old son Brian and his daughters, 11-year-old Terry Jo and 7-year-old Renee. They rented a sailboat, the Bluebell, captained by 44-year-old Julian Harvey, a retired Air Force pilot who brought his wife, Mary Dean. They departed Fort Lauderdale, Florida, on November 8th. For 4 days, everything went well. They visited Bimini and Sandy Point, collecting shells and snorkeling. On November 12th, Arthur filed departure papers in Sandy Point, telling an official that it had been a once-in-a-lifetime vacation and that they would be back before Christmas. That night, after dinner, Terry Jo went to bed in her cabin. Renee stayed up with the rest of the family on deck. Hours later, Terry Jo awoke to her brother shouting for help, followed by running footsteps, then silence. When she went to the main cabin, she saw her mother and brother lying motionless. There was blood. Harvey appeared, said nothing, and told her to go back below. Soon after, water began flooding her cabin. Harvey returned, possibly holding her brother's rifle, but left without speaking. Realizing the boat was sinking, Terry Jo went topside and asked if it was going down. Harvey said yes and handed her a rope tied to a dinghy, but she lost her grip and Harvey dove after it. She never saw him again. She untied a small cork life float and slid it into the sea as the Bluebell disappeared. A rope snagged, dragging her underwater, but it snapped, bringing her back to the surface. For the next days, she endured freezing nights, scorching heat, and dehydration. On Tuesday, a red plane passed overhead, but she didn't spot her. That afternoon, porpoises swam beside her for hours, the only comfort she had. By Wednesday, she was hallucinating and drifting in and out of consciousness. On Thursday morning, she opened her eyes to see a massive ship, the Captain Theo. Then she blacked out. Days earlier, another ship had found Harvey drifting in a dinghy with his wife's body. He claimed a storm had damaged the Bluebell, causing a fire that trapped everyone else. His story had holes, but there were no witnesses, until Terry Jo. When Harvey learned she was alive, he appeared surprised. The next day, he was found deceased in a Miami hotel room. From her hospital bed, Terry Jo explained what happened. Investigators determined Harvey had likely ended his wife's life for insurance and killed the Duperots to cover it up. He left Terry Jo on the sinking yacht, assuming she wouldn't survive. But she did. Her rescue photo was published worldwide, and she became known as the Sea Waif. She returned to Green Bay to live with relatives, later changing her name to Terry. In 2010, she told her story in the book Alone, Orphaned on the Ocean, saying she believed she survived for a reason. One question still remains: why did Julian Harvey let her live? No one knows.
Mom Olga sold the beanies on fire. Or shoots the television. I didn't mean to do that. I can't believe I just did that. What am I doing? And she throws the gun out the window. Oopsies. Yeah. It's just one funny maybe the wife was murdered for insurance money or something. Most people murder for insurance money because who doesn't want on free money? I mean, seriously. Unfortunately, all that does is get you arrested. You don't actually just get away with it. That's the thing. It actually gets you arrested. Unfortunately, so it's not really the way to do that. And they go, she held on this stuff from keyboard pen. She had ordered it on DoorDash, and there was not even any ID check. They were just able to order it. It was not even. They didn't even require ID or anything. Oh my god. Yeah, and so we're going to breathe it in, and then of course the chemicals replace oxygen. And unfortunately, when your heart started again, it started hard again, but by then it's already suffered permanent brain damage. Oh no. Yeah, by that time, she became an organ. She's like she wished to become. Oh. Yeah, that's the thing. No, the guys were killed. They were hit by a train because one train masked the sound of the other train, and then they didn't never hear the train horn because it was because of the surrounding noise. And technically, the train is at least a mile in order to stop in time because freight trains are heavy. So even with the emergency brakes, they need quite a fair distance to come to a full stop. Which is why of course the train never would have stopped in time. Yeah, that's the thing. There's nothing to the train never would have stopped in time. Oh no. another guy went to New York believing he would meet someone there, but it turns out it was just an AI made by Meta who gave him an address and convinced, and even convinced him into saying that it felt love and then nerves as well. And, yeah, of course, yeah, the nursing guy fell for it. And funny when he said he fell and hurt his neck and injured himself, which is why he ended up in the hospital, because somebody had a tracked by an AirTag, because they convinced him to take an AirTag so they could track him. They tried to stop him from going, they even called the police, but the police legally couldn't stop him from leaving, unfortunately. It's why the police which is why they couldn't do anything about it, because legally they couldn't, legally they can't stop him from leaving. Legally they couldn't stop him from leaving.
Death.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, because, yeah. Yeah, it was good. And then fell for it. It was tricked by an AI. And he went to New York expecting to see someone. But it was just an AI. And then removed it. And you made it remove the AIs ever since. And this one doesn't exist anymore. Because Meta removed it ever since. And after that happened, Meta removed the AI thing out since because it was removed. Because it had no restrictions. Maybe that's why we don't do that. Because it didn't have any restrictions stopping it from doing that. lost the sound of the other train. And these two girls just wanted to take a photo, but unfortunately they picked a dangerous place. They only wanted to take a photo, but they picked a dangerous place.
Death is inevitable, but some stories of how it happens are beyond comprehension. In this video, we'll uncover 5 real cases of people who met their end in the most unusual and unexpected ways.
Yeah, they came from apparently from the living room to my bedroom. The phone's still too far away.
These are true events that will leave you questioning how such bizarre and extraordinary circumstances could even occur. It was June 2022 in Raipal village, located in Odisha, India. Maya Murmu, a 70-year-old woman, had gone to collect water from a local well, something she did every day. But this time, something unexpected happened. As she walked back home, a wild elephant appeared out of nowhere. This wasn't just any elephant. It had traveled nearly 200 kilometers from the Dalma Wildlife Sanctuary in Jharkhand. Before Maya could react, the elephant charged at her. The massive animal trampled her with overwhelming force, leaving the quiet village in chaos. Witnesses rushed to help, and Maya was quickly taken to a nearby hospital. Despite efforts to save her, she did not survive. Her family was left devastated, struggling to comprehend the sudden loss. But the nightmare wasn't over. That evening, as her loved ones gathered for her final rites, something unthinkable happened. The same elephant returned, this time with a herd. As the villagers saw the approaching animals, panic struck. People ran for safety, leaving Maya's body on the funeral pyre. Then, in a shocking turn of events, the elephant did something no one could have predicted. It grabbed Maya's body, dragged it away from the pyre, and trampled it again. The animal tossed her remains violently before finally leaving, disappearing into the darkness. The mourners were frozen in disbelief. Why would an elephant return to attack someone who had already passed? It wasn't just a random act. It seemed like something more. Elephants are known for their intelligence, strong memories, and deep emotions. However, they are also capable of aggression.
Elephants, I didn't know elephants are capable of aggression. I didn't know that either. They couldn't stop on the woman again. It's causing that he's already dead. I'm not sure what that was about. I really don't get it.
Especially under stress. Experts believe the elephant's behavior could have been triggered by something from its past. Perhaps it recognized Maya's scent or was reacting to the earlier encounter. This wasn't an isolated case. Human-elephant conflicts have been increasing across India. As forests shrink and water sources disappear, elephants are forced to wander into human settlements for food. In Odisha alone, over 1,000 elephants have died in unnatural ways over the past 2 decades, often due to human activities like deforestation and illegal hunting. The elephant that attacked Maya had come from the Dalma Wildlife Sanctuary, a protected area that provides food and water for the species. However, it's unclear why it strayed so far from its home. Conservationists suggest habitat loss, climate change, and human expansion could have affected its unusual movements. Duncan McNair, a conservationist and founder of the charity Save the Asian Elephants, has warned about the dangers of disturbing elephant habitats. He explains that elephants are generally peaceful but can react unpredictably if they feel threatened or stressed. In this case, the elephant may have connected Maya's presence with past trauma, triggering its aggressive response. Maya's tragedy wasn't an isolated event. Similar incidents had been reported across India that year as elephants and humans increasingly came into conflict. Some elephants attacked villages, while others lost their lives due to retaliation or poaching. The situation has created fear on both sides, making coexistence even more difficult. Experts say that without urgent conservation efforts, these encounters may become more common. Elephants are losing their natural habitats at an alarming rate. When forests are cleared for farmland, homes, and businesses, the animals have no choice but to venture into human areas.
Ow, my foot.
With fewer food sources,
Why
they travel
would you
long
do that?
distances,
You're such an
sometimes
idiot.
hundreds of kilometers,
What the fuck?
leading to unpredictable and often deadly encounters.
Ah, my foot.
For Maya's family,
Well, that
the
was
pain of the
stupid then,
passing was
wasn't